Okay, hello everyone. Larry Gordon here with the Five Towns Jewish Times with our weekly, regularly scheduled podcast. Very special guest in the studio today is Josh Eisen. We got to know each other a couple of years ago in Israel on a trip to Jerusalem and around the rest of the country with Mike Huckabee, Joe Frager and company. Josh is a political activist, I would say, and has made the decision to throw his hat into the ring and is running for Congress, seeking to what's now it's in Westchester County, area that encompasses some well-known areas to a good deal of our core listenership and viewership, like Rockland County, Muncie, and what's the rest of the district like?
All of Rockland and big chunks of Westchester, but it includes Ramapo, which includes Muncie, and probably 30 to 40,000 Orthodox and Hasidic voters in Rockland County and Westchester County.
So the big news here is that the seat was occupied by Nita Lowey, who is rather well known and played a prominent role in Congress up until her retirement. She's serving, of course, till the end of the year, right?
Yes.
Till the end of 2020.
Right. She's going to finish out her term.
She's going to finish out her term. And you're running as a Republican.
Yes, sir.
In New York.
In New York.
So
in Westchester.
What is that like?
Well, as I've said before, it's a little bit of a gluttony for punishment. But I think it's also an opportunity to remind people that core conservative Republican principles are actually now relevant. And there are even liberal people who think that a $21 trillion debt is too much. A $1.3 trillion annual budget deficit is too much. And this is an idea that resonates when people begin to realize what really is going on. There's also a tyranny of power that I think has taken root in Albany. And that tyranny of power manifests in laws like the new bail, the new justice reform bill that will allow someone to burglar a home in the evening and then to be free on the street the next day and to demand to enter that home with an attorney or even without in order to have access to the crime scene. And that would be a no bail. That level of crime would have no bail.
That becomes law on January 1st.
Yeah, they're trying to stop that. But that's one example. The allowance for an abortion after a woman is in labor, that is the way the law reads. They will tell you on the left, it never comes up that an abortion will happen. Then I ask them to put that into the law because the laws are reflective of what we are as a society. And to allow abortion in the 9th month is just something nobody in the district likes or wants. And most of the liberal Democrats in our district don't realize how far off the rails their leaders have gone. And I think those are two examples of where you have intellectual left-wing fascist-type leaders who are just out of touch with the traditional beneficiaries of more left-wing politics. And that break between the intellectual left-wing and the guys on the ground, I think, has been problematic.
So before we get down to the meat and potatoes issues, I'm sure you looked at the numbers, and you analyzed what has to technically get done in order to achieve victory. And based on, the way you sounded a moment ago, it sounds like it's a largely Democratic district that's been, of course, reelecting a Democrat for more than 30 years.
That is correct.
So what are the numbers look like, and what is victory going to look like for you?
Well, I'll begin by saying that in 2014, Chris Day, a Republican from the heart of the Rockland County Republican Party, somebody who could never get the Hasidic vote, somebody who had no real affinity with the Jewish community in Westchester, was able to get over 45% of the vote to Nita Lowey's 49%. He had $200,000 to her $2.2 million, and he only really started campaigning in May. So had he had more time and more money, I actually think he could have won. And I actually felt that a Republican could have beaten Nita. I think now that Nita isn't running, there's certainly a path to victory. Those two numbers alone demonstrate that. I think there are other factors in this district also that play into the hands of a Republican contender, because a lot of the Orthodox Jewish voters are going to pull for Trump at the top of the ticket. And now it's not this natural thing where, okay, we Trump at the top, Nita in the middle. Now it's Trump at the top, who's in the middle? And they'll have to choose. And I think now there'll be a decision to be made. Again, I have a lot of strategies for different groups.
Mm-hmm. I don't know how it is in Westchester, in your area, but the assumption is in Brooklyn, I think, largely in Brooklyn, that talking about the Hasidic vote, for example, the assumption is that on local elections, maybe citywide, maybe even statewide, they tend to vote Democrat. But when it comes to national elections, Trump did very well in places like Borough Park and Williamsburg. National election, they tend to vote Republican. That's the situation in your case. So how important is the Hasidic vote in Rockland County, which is in the district? Is that the difference between victory and defeat potentially?
I wouldn't say it's the difference between victory and defeat, but a candidate like me has an advantage that I can get that vote. And those are 20, 25, it could even be 30,000 voters. The last census was 10 years ago. They've clearly punched way above their weight, and I don't expect them not to do that in the 2020 election. So they're extremely important for many reasons. I think just in terms of who I am as a human being and as a Jew, if I can't attract those voters compared to all the other people running, I think then I would question my own Jewishness in some way, because I think I should be their candidate. Now, if there's some practical thing that happens, maybe a Carlucci wins the primary and they have a relationship with him and he's able to make certain promises to them that I can't make, maybe there's a way that that somebody else can gain their trust. But I think just on a natural basis, I should be their guy. Let's see if that's the case.
You're the lone Republican running,
yes,
right? And there's going to be a Democratic primary with, I don't know, we were talking before about 10 different candidates.
Quite a number.
Does it matter who wins the Democratic primary in terms of who you prefer your opposition to be? I mean, look on the national level. It's amazing that I don't want to change the subject too extremely, but Trump can't find a formidable candidate. He's the most criticized president in the history of the United States, but the Democrats, in their vastness, cannot find a formidable candidate yet that has the ability to get any traction to be even a threat to his candidacy at this point. So the question is does it make a difference in the Democratic pack there, who wins? Is there an easier candidate to beat, or is there one particular candidate as a Democrat that you think you'd have a more difficult time against?
I think on a mechanical level, one would naturally say that the more to the left the candidate is, and the more to the left the candidate at the top of the Democratic line is, the better it is for me. But I would really answer that question differently, and I would say that every once in a while, there are people out there who identify themselves as leaders and they enter the political fray and they try to be above that fray and they try to capture people's imagination and they try to just really think about what the future of the country is going to look like in 10 years and in 30 years and in 50 years. And they do it with a full heart and soul because their kids are in their minds, the kids of their friends, the kids in their communities, the people they see all the time. And the bickering that right now represents our political state is just, I think, unacceptable. So I'm really hoping that I'm able to capture an imagination, just capture a certain kind of spirit that maybe makes people not even want to ask me, what do you think about Trump, or all those questions that kind of are there to disqualify you. So hopefully I do have enough in my platform that is at once dreamy, I would say, but at the same time practical. And I think there's a lot there in terms of that.
So this interview is going to be up on a number of websites. It's going to be up for eternity on YouTube. It'll be promoted by us, of course. And
the archaeologists will dig it up in 1,000 years.
And it can go into a time capsule, and it'll be promoted hopefully by your campaign and your friends. And you know how these things, they tend to just explode once you say something that has that kind of power, that kind of explosive value in a good and positive way. So the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, who's holding impeachment hearings, and this podcast may be seen weeks from now when these hearings are over, but at least we're talking on December 4th, on Wednesday, December 4th, just for context explanations. Gerald Nadler is the only member of Congress that has attended yeshiva, and that distinguishes him. To me, it just adds to being astounded about his positions. But we were largely going to be talking to a potential voting group in your district that would like to hear about your personal educational background, if you can share that with us.
So I can explain that and also address the issue with Jerry Nadler. And
you went to yeshiva for 8 years.
I went to yeshiva growing up. I went to Dov Revel in Forest Hills as a little boy with Rabbi Charner. I then switched to SAR because it was an open school, and that's what my mother thought was good. So I don't know how much I learned in SAR for 4 years, but I had a childhood, and I was able to do math and read, and I guess that's good when you're in 8th grade. I then went to MTA, which is a 4-year all-boys yeshiva. We did quite a bit of learning there, not necessarily by choice. When you sit in front of an open Gemara for 4 hours, you're bound to learn for an hour just incidentally. So,
but you never forget the experience.
No, you don't forget.
You're sitting in yeshiva, for 8 hours a day or 12 hours a day. It makes an impression on you.
Yeah, I mean, we studied. I took it seriously. I came from a home where learning was taken seriously, where the intellectual pursuit was valued in its essence, not in its accoutrement. The degree, okay, the substance, that's what counted. And then I did a PhD in Talmud, in religion, with David Weiss-Olivny, who knows, well, he's not so well now, but he knows Shas Balpes. So that was also a very good experience. But I think that experience really, all those experiences and the respect I have for Gemara and for learning and for that way of life is about the positivity that's in the learning. And the power there is so positive, and the positivity is so strong because of the power. And when you see a guy like Nadler, what he's doing is he's appropriating that power for a negative thing. He's taking the power of parsing words and parsing letters, and instead of being somebody who uses the law for compassion, which is what the Gemara teaches us, he uses the law as a whip. And he should be ashamed of himself, because nothing could be more un-Jewish than a Jew using his intellectual legal skill to manipulate the law into a negative place.
So I was on the west side of Manhattan a few weeks ago, and was at the home of Rabbi Alan Schwartz of Congressional Tzedek, and Gerald Nadler used to live in the same building with Rabbi Schwartz on West End Avenue. And Rabbi Schwartz told us that he speaks to Nadler on occasion. They were neighbors for a long time. They don't live in the same building anymore. Nadler moved. And he said to Nadler recently, he said, "You are a one-man re-election committee for Donald Trump by doing what he's doing." But we were talking before, and that might be their only chance. But that takes us off in a whole other political direction. But you're right. I think you're right about. I don't think Nadler's years in yeshiva really taught him anything of that he's using in any kind of valuable way. But he knows. He should know better based on that education. And my point to bringing that up, Josh, is because you have obviously an extensive Jewish education background, yeshiva, and like you said, a PhD in Gemara study and Talmud study. you could be conceivably, if you're victorious, the real conscience of the House of Representatives.
Yeah, I would embrace that role of being the voice of Talmudic reasoning, of Talmudic compassion, of everything that people often don't understand about Judaism, of things that defy the stereotypes, that a Jew leaves money on the table because he doesn't take anything that might not belong to him. If you're unsure, it's not yours. And that's the essential Jewish way. And I think our Gemara teaches us that, but I think our government today operates quite differently. And I think that respect that the Gemara has for a shavet pruta, for something that's worth just a penny, that even that has to be returned, that has to be considered in a transaction. I think our government, a shavet million, if something's even worth $1 million, it's just a rounding error. And I think the government owes it to the people. And I think if the government treated money the way the Gemara demands that money be treated, we'd have smaller government and lower taxes. And those are essential Republican values, and those are essential Talmudic values.
Well, it's obvious that the country is more divided than it's ever been. There was a time when it was a household name, whether it's Nita Lowey or Peter King or in the olden days, Al D'Amato, or go back to Jacob Javits if you go back that far. There was a time when people weren't sure, was he a Republican or a Democrat, and it didn't matter. All he had as a priority was the better good of the country, the people he represented, and hopefully that was the way that was the reason he or she were constantly reelected. Now the divide is so telling and so obvious. People can identify the players based on their party. And that's especially pronounced in your situation. If Nita Lowey was running, you probably wouldn't have decided to run.
I was planning to run before she announced her retirement. In fact, I filed the paperwork the day she announced, and things got held up because of that. That was the day after Yom Kippur, and apparently she had a reckoning on Yom Kippur and
decided not to run.
And give her credit that she realized that she's not really fit to campaign. That's why I was ready to run against her. I knew I had the inside scoop. I knew what Chris Day learned in 2014 would have been far more true in 2020. She just wouldn't be able to keep up on the campaign trail. And I think over time we would have picked off enough people. And I think many of the religious voters also in Rockland felt that maybe her time has come. So there was an opening there, and certainly I was able to get some support from people in the JCC of Harrison, which is where we both are members, and I was able to get support from older members of the community who felt that it was just time for her to move on, and they didn't see me as a Republican as much as they saw me as probably the most legitimate replacement for her. If you compare me to all the other candidates, I'm actually a pro-labor guy. I'm a big dignity in labor person. I think about a lot of the human rights issues when it comes to healthcare is a human right, housing is a human right, food is a human right. These are all old school Jewish liberal values that now are Republican values. And I think many people have switched party allegiances. I think the Lieberman, the Lieberman model has kind of trickled down. I do know some Democrats who are now Republicans in Harrison, but certainly she had supporters who were ready to bail on her. So I thought there was an opening even against her. Now I think it's more open. I think there's a real opportunity because
it's a vacant seat.
Yeah,
it's anyone's to grab if they mount the proper campaign, of course. And I want to shift over to policy on Israel, which is very important in the House. And to confuse things, also using a little bit of twisted Talmudic logic, both sides, Republican and Democrats. I mean, you have the State Department issuing a ruling that they recognize that settlements, for example, in Judea and Samaria are no longer a violation of international law, and you have Jewish Congress people, signing a petition demanding that the State Department reverse that policy. So for the average voter, probably it's difficult to ascertain if policy on Israel, if U.S. policy on Israel is a priority issue, as it is for many of us. Is that something you could assign to the individual candidate, or is it something that is determined or defined specifically by party these days?
It seems at this point that it's still defined by the individual person, especially if you look at who's participating in AIPAC. I think
that's changing. I think
it's changing, but still, Nita Lowey was there, Elliot Engel. You have all the usual Democrats.
When Chuck Schumer is up there, or when Nancy Pelosi is up there, and they say they're pro-Israel, they mean something different than when Mike Pompeo or Donald Trump or Vice President Pence is up there. They say the same words, but they mean something different.
It's true. They do mean something different, but I think what pro-Israel people need to recognize is that there is a movement now on the left among the left-wing fascists in the universities. The left-wing fascistas in the universities they loathe God, they loathe communities, they loathe tradition, they certainly loathe Israel, they loathe Donald Trump for no good reason, really, just because they have this hatred in their hearts. And they are extremely dangerous. And I think when compared to them, I don't see a big distinction even between J Street and AIPAC. I think as Americans, for us, we need to really focus on a path where Israel is secure and where there's no question about Israel's legitimacy, and the idea that from all the countries in the world, Israel is the one country that needs to affirm and reaffirm its legitimacy as a nation, its legitimacy as a Jewish country, when you have countries like England where the sovereign is also the head of the Anglican Church. I just think it's absurd. Okay,
but that's where there's political wiggle room. The key word that you use is Israel being secure. What does secure mean? The Republicans, it means a stronger military, standing firm on their borders, getting sovereignty over Judea and Samaria, hopefully getting sovereignty over Golan, eventually getting sovereignty over the Jordan Valley. That's what it means to many Republicans, not all, but many. Secure to the Democratic side. Secure to the Democratic side these days means a smaller Israel, a two-state solution. That's security. I like to say in these situations that the reason they're for a smaller Israel is because if Israel shrinks in size, then when Iran fires a missile, chances are it's a less of a chance it's going to hit Israel because it's a smaller Israel. If it's a larger Israel, the target is bigger. So that's just tongue-in-cheek. But I think as time goes by, there's some logic and credibility to that to that idea. But the question is, can both sides be pro-Israel, and which is the real pro-Israel side?
Look, I think in the face of the left-wing intellectuals, the legitimacy of Israel is the most important issue. I think once you get inside the legitimacy of Israel and you want to talk about what does security look like, I think right now, AIPAC, certainly J Street, but both of them are advocating for a two-state solution, and that means Mike Pompeo and Donald Trump and all the Republicans that you talk about, they still talk about a two-state solution. So whatever they have in mind about security with respect to a two-state solution is what I have in mind. And to be honest, I don't know exactly how that would look. And until I'm in Congress, I'm not going to have access to the information that could really inform me. But I can tell you, as someone who spent a dozen summers in the West Bank and Samaria at a settlement called Neve Tzuf, I was there every single summer from second or third grade on, I can tell you that security doesn't look like what it should in that settlement, where a number of people that I grew up with, kids that I can visualize their face right now, Udi Fogel, Nevensal, who were killed on the roads. So my cousin married a woman, and she was also attacked once on the road, and she just barely came out of that alive. So I'm intimately familiar with the goings on over there. I was also in cars that were fired upon and rocks were thrown at, and that's a way of life there. I don't consider that secure.
So secure Israel too does not mean
so secure
surrendering
means
territory.
that secure. Well, I think in the situation you would like to believe, and you'd like to hope that you can have just really two people living kind of side by side. The reality today is that the Palestinians themselves are just not structured enough to be trusted in any way, separate from whether I'm Jewish or not Jewish. Just stepping outside, looking at it economically, militarily, culturally, socially, religiously, they're fractured. So Israel, in order to stay secure, I think Israel needs to control the border at the Jordan River. It needs to control all the borders. And I know it seems like I'm creating that whoever advocates for this, and I think this is roughly the Republican position going forward when they talk about security, yet a two-state solution, I think that's kind of where it's headed. If you still want to allow for a certain type of self-determination for the Palestinians, which they kind of already have. So
we have like 3 minutes left. So I just want to address one more subject. That's the subject of what does the Republican candidate do in 2020 in terms of aligning themselves with President Trump. I mean, the Republican base, he's very popular. He's got over a 94% approval rating amongst Republicans is what I saw last. But you're in a liberal part of New York State, which is, hopelessly liberal, as they say. But it's a do-or-die situation politically. So what's, at this point anyway, and the election's 11 months away, right?
Yes,
November
sir.
8th. November 8th,
We still have time.
2020. We still have a little time. I mean, if you're a good politician, you could change your mind 12, 14 times between now and then. But what's not only in your race,
good politician.
not only in your race, because you never held political office before. You're not, like you said, you're not a professional politician. This is something you're getting involved in because you genuinely care about the society that we live in and the country. So, but for conventional wisdom for Republican candidates, not necessarily yourself. Attach yourself to the Trump campaign, or take a couple of steps away.
I think when it comes to Trump, I appreciate what you did here, which is you left Trump for the end of the conversation. Often people lead with Trump in order to stump, disqualify, qualify, love, hate, and whatever it is they do with your response to Trump. I think Trump is a complicated guy. I'm aligned with Trump. I gave Trump money almost as soon as he announced that he was running in the last election. I gave quite a bit of money now, so anybody looking me up will know pretty quickly that I've been financially supportive of Trump. And I've been financially supportive of Trump mainly because he is a pretty middle-of-the-road Republican when it comes to policies. I think he certainly bungled things on the $1.3 trillion budget deficit. I don't think that was a very Republican thing to do. There's certain things that he does that I might not agree or fully understand, like the withdrawal from Syria in such haste. But his position that one American life is not worth whatever it is that might be gained is something that certainly as a Jew I relate to very closely with, the idea that we do quite a bit for one life. So he kept his word. He came out in his campaign with a pretty isolationist message, and he delivered. So I don't think people should be so shocked or surprised. And I understand the concern people have for the Kurds. Trump's concern was for the mother of that one American soldier.
Right.
And I can understand where he comes from. I think his position on China has also been pretty effective. I think that he is stopping murder from happening in Hong Kong. I think that he, with his trade negotiations, is actually creating some wiggle room on human rights there. It's something I didn't really realize till like the last couple of months when I just started asking myself, why aren't the Chinese more heavy-handed? So Trump himself said on Fox News last week that he's the reason, and I believe him.
Mm-hmm. So, as you said, it's complicated.
It's complicated, but you got to pick the issues.
That's the complexities of American politics.
But it becomes
today.
much simpler when you go issue by issue.
Right.
So if I talk about the taxes, the salt tax is obviously a disaster for my district.
Our guest has been Josh Eisen. He's running for Congress in Westchester County. Lives in Harrison, New York, and we'll be watching your race as time goes by. We wish you the best of luck, and we're hoping for your victory. So you'll come back again and again and share some of the inside stuff that goes on inside Washington. Thanks very much for coming in today.
Thank you.